Hello, and welcome to the Emotional World podcast, where we take a deep dive into the human condition. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming Adrian Salazar onto the podcast. Now, Adrian is the head of culture and integrity, which I think is a fantastic job title in and of itself, but we'll get onto that later. At SafetyWing. And SafetyWing, they're a provider of nomad insurance for global travel and insurance solutions for remote teams. And then today we're going to delve into, I think, some quite meaningful topics even, such as authenticity. And we might even look at some buzzwords that maybe might be shaping company culture, but I don't know, are they all that helpful? And then we'll dive into SafetyWing's culture and the use of things like integrity and authenticity and stuff like that. Anyway, enough from me. Let's get our guest on the air. So welcome to the Emotional World podcast, Adrian Salazar.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on, Adrian. I'm really, really excited to have you on today. It's going to be a really useful episode for our listeners, I think.
Cool. I'm excited.
Good. And as per usual for this podcast, what I'd like to do is open with our unexpected yet innocuous question. So a question that you haven't been able to prepare for is innocuous enough that it's not going to ask you to disclose your deep, darkest secrets, and also will help us get to know you a little differently or a little more. So my question for you today is, what is a memorable shop from your youth?
A memorable shop, like a store?
Yes, like a store, yes.
From my youth, what does that mean? Like, how young are we talking here? 5-year-old or 10-year-old?
Let's go say, I know, 5 to 15.
5 to 15. Okay. There was this music instrument shop back in Lima, where I was born and raised. It was a tiny shop, and it was also primarily like a repair shop. And the guys who used to run that shop were friendly, and I used to go after school just to hang around, just to see the instruments, to play guitar, like grab someone else's guitar that was there for maintenance or whatever. And they were very kind to me and very inviting, and that was one of the reasons why I started formalizing my music training.
Wow! And what music do you? What music do you play?
I play blues guitar.
Blues. I love blues. And do you write your own material, or is it you playing other people's stuff?
Well, I've been writing on and off for 20 years, and I haven't released any like body of work, any meaningful body of work. Although I do have a YouTube channel with a few like million views, maybe.
Wow, we are definitely putting a link to that in the show notes.
All right, it's a bit out there, but it's cool. And now I'm actually recording an album, compiling compositions from the past 20 years. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I feel like we could do a whole podcast episode on your musical back catalogue. What is it about music in particular for you then?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
What is it that you enjoy about music, whether that be writing or playing?
Well, yeah, that's a very deep question for me, because my father is a musician. So I've always been surrounded by music and art in that way. And my mother was a university professor. So it was sort of half and half, science and art. And so music is embedded within myself on a fundamental level. What is it about it? I think it's one of those things that gets you in a state in which you don't think too much. And for someone like myself who think a lot and it's kind of hard to stop thinking sometimes, that's a very viable alternative to stop thinking.
Yeah. Wow. And do you get to bring that musical side of you into work then? So I guess you described there that you use it as a release because you spend a lot of time thinking at work, and then the music allows you to not. But do you get to bring that musicality of yours into what you do at SafetyWing?
Yes, but not directly. Indirectly. There, there are two channels for that. One is one is what you get from most art forms, which is a kind of good taste. You learn to mix ingredients into something that doesn't exist. So that is a very valuable skill, I would say. It, I think at a neurological level, it shares something with cooking. To me, that's the closest thing to music is like cooking. You don't have anything, and you have a few ingredients, and then you create something, and you taste it, and you adjust. So the feedback loops are tiny. Just like music, you move your finger one like millimeter to the side, and the pitch changes slightly, or you press slightly harder, and the pitch also adjusts. So it's just like cooking. So there's this good taste, this acquired, trained good taste. But there is also this mindset of experimentation that is also multidisciplinary. It doesn't matter what you do. You have this mindset of venturing into the unknown, and for life and for work, that is a useful tool that gets some people uncomfortable though. But I use it.
Yeah, and I suppose the link that I'd like to take then is that's an important part of you. So that's why I was curious about how you get to bring that into work, because when you talk about integrity and authenticity at SafetyWing, I suppose I was wondering how much of you do you bring or can you bring in?
Right. That's a good question. So it seems like the self is governed by a few different, let's call them spirits, or slightly different personalities. So what you bring to work is when you try to bring your authentic self is a good representation of these spirits, a meaningful, accurate representation, although not every single one, right? So if you have a tendency to be hedonistic, for example, maybe that's not a great idea to bring that to work. But but if you're authentic and you are deliberately authentic, you bring a good representation of that. Definitely, like in my case, in my own personal case, I bring the artistic me 100%. I bring the kind version of myself. I pick and choose the qualities that I think are the most meaningful to the work we do and to the work I do, which is authentic, but it's not completely transparent. Completely transparent is not great, in my opinion. Just like you don't bring everything to art, you don't bring everything to family. You pick and choose, and you don't contradict. That's important too.
So and I think we discussed this when we spoke off air in the kind of planning for this episode. I struggle with the buzzword of authenticity. I support the sentiment behind it, and I struggle with the practical reality of that. Probably even more so with the phrase "bring your whole self to work." I think I struggle with that even more, because again, do you really want my whole self, every single
No.
part of what that is? I mean, I sing a lot, and I sing really, really badly. And if I bring all of that into work, I'm not sure that's going to be a great thing for everybody. Granted, I also publish it on YouTube, but more for, I think, poking fun at myself than for serious reasons. And so for you, from a cultural perspective at SafetyWing, then how do you balance that authenticity bit?
That's a very good question, slash reflection. So I think it's important to establish the value of authenticity to expand on it. So I think there are two primary benefits of being authentic. Being authentic is like being consistent, coherent with your true oneself, particularly when that posture or a posture of yours contradicts or goes against the pressure from society. That seems to be a good description. The pressure from the groups, the different groups in life. An authentic self is able to go against that pressure when it makes sense, when it's coherent. So the value of authenticity, the value of that act is twofold. So on the one hand, authenticity is a great connection mechanism. If I bring my authentic self, like I'm bringing my authentic self with you right now, deliberately, and by the end of this conversation, you probably will have a good impression of who I am, what I believe, and over time, that impression, because it's authentic, will compound and create a predictable representation of myself quickly. If I'm not authentic, on the other hand, you wouldn't know exactly who I am, because I would be sort of hiding behind the society, this societal thinking or something like that. So it's a connection mechanism. It streamlines connection between people. And the other one, on the other hand, it's an anti-corruption mechanism, meaning, and this is particularly important in groups like companies, or like functional teams. It sort of scales very gracefully. So anti-corruption, because if you have an idea and I don't have one, I can shut up and let your idea through. That's great. But if you have an idea and I disagree, I can state my disagreement regardless of who you are. I can say, I disagree. I authentically don't align with what you're saying. So that is very important, because the alternative is political thinking, political action. Like, you believe something, you're my friend, you're my boss, you're whatever. I agree with you. Or you're my enemy and I disagree with you. And those are very corrupt ways of acting. The being authentic is a better alternative. So if that is authenticity, and if that is the value of authenticity, and God knows, I mean, maybe that's true. That's why it's important to bring your authentic self. And that doesn't mean bringing your whole self. There is a difference there. There is a difference of choosing what is productive.
There was so many different elements of that I really enjoyed. So let's begin with, because when you said corruption, I was thinking, wow, that's a big word, and one I associate with kind of large systemic, things, whether it be corruption at a governmental level or a corporate level. I hadn't thought about it as a corruption of my authenticity at like a micro level. So in that moment where I might think that's a really different idea to what I would have, and I think there's a different way of going about it, and I'm going to keep that to myself. I hadn't thought about it in terms of a corruption of my authenticity, I suppose, in that way. So that was a really interesting reframe. Just really got me thinking about it in a different way. And then as you were bringing what you said to a close, I'll be honest with you, Adrian, I wasn't listening because my head was so full of everything else you've been saying before. So the last probably 20 seconds of what you were saying, I didn't listen attentively to because I was lost in my own head. And I'm hoping you might remember so you can remind me.
I was talking about authenticity being two different things, like an anti-corruption mechanism and a connection mechanism. But and it's very useful that way. But also authenticity doesn't mean complete transparency, and you don't want to, like, if you're having a bad day, if you're having a bad day, and say that you're a barista, right? You serve coffee. I love coffee. I have so much admiration for good baristas, right? But say that you're having a bad day, right? Your dog died, whatever, and you're feeling emotional, and you go to work. You choose to go to work, or you have to go to work. Bringing those emotions to work is not professional. You see what I mean? If you cannot cope, it's probably a good idea to take a day off, take a week off, whatever you need. But if you do show up, you do have to bring your curated, authentic self. Let's coin that term now. Curated, authentic self. That means that means bringing a good service, bringing a smile, making someone else's life good for 15 minutes. That's so valuable.
And that reminds me of one of my favorite books is by a researcher called Ali Hochschild, called The Managed Heart. And within that, she coined the term emotional labor, which is that that work that we have to do with that sadness that we might be bringing, for example. Because in that context, in that role as a barista, when someone says to the barista, "Oh, how are you today?" it wouldn't be appropriate for the barista to say, "Well, actually, I'm devastated because my pet passed away recently, and I've had to come to work because it's a distraction from loneliness that I feel at home now." Because the customer's going to go, "Whoa, I didn't necessarily want all of that.
Right.
I just wanted a nice cup of coffee."
Right. There's like a line there too, right? Because it seems like there is a way to bring that up. You could, but I think the way in which you go about it, the timing, when, if to say it. I mean, yeah, you could bring your. There is a line there. I'm not sure. There is no formula, but you could bring your honest, like your life situation, if appropriate, right? There is this reading the room thing.
Yeah, we had a guest on this podcast before called Eric Heshin. He's a researcher from Israel, I believe, and he talked about how the relationship between the people involved in the interaction, the goal of the interaction, what the interaction is there to do, and the intensity of the expression of the emotion being like moderating factors in where that line is. So if the emotion is really intense, that might make it more difficult to cross the line. And if that relationship is quite close, that might make it easier to cross the line. Whereas if the goal of that interaction is to achieve something quickly and move rapidly, then the line might be further away, if that makes sense, in terms of
that makes sense.
when it may be appropriateness to disclose.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So how does the authenticity and the integrity bit then? Because we mentioned it, or I mentioned at the outset, that your title of the head of culture and integrity, I find fascinating as a title in and of itself. So could you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. Definitely. Let's talk about integrity. That one is fascinating to me. And so I've been doing this. I've been in this role for 3 years now, almost 3 years. And the word integrity has always been puzzling. At first, I in an aspirational way, like it sounds good, type of thing. But as I grew into the role, I discovered integrity. And I was talking to this guy a while back, and he had this description for integrity. He will say that human integrity, like what we mean in the context of human behavior, is just like structural integrity. So he was saying, if you think about a bridge, right? The bridge has this structural integrity to it. It can uphold until whatever weight. It has these conditions. It can, I don't know, survive this kind of earthquake or whatever. It has this structural integrity to it, and it's a physical thing. It follows the laws of physics. He was saying personal integrity is just like that. You cannot have personal integrity sometimes. You have to be, and it seems like that's what people usually think, right? It seems like you think that you sometimes act with integrity, and hence you're a good person. But other times you don't, and those are like flaws or exceptions, or that integrity is conditional to context, and that's bullshit. That's just a way to justify yourself, to justify the lack of integrity. So I actually subscribe to this notion that of structural integrity. You either have it or you don't. And I think it's one of those things that it's like always work in progress, because we are humans, and indeed we break our own principles. But it's good. I think it's a good framework. So in a company, the company level, depending on your values, depending on your mission, depending on the conduct that you want to institute, acting with integrity is acting along those set of principles. And acting with structural integrity means no exceptions. This is how we do things, no exceptions. So I'm one of the people in charge of making sure that we have this structural integrity in place.
And I guess the question that's going to be really easy for me to say, and I imagine harder for you to answer, is the how question. So how do you do that? So either how do you develop it, or how do you maintain that structural integrity?
Right. Well, the biggest factor is hiring the right people. I mean, it's just like having a relationship with someone. Like if you have a relationship, if you're thinking about having a relationship with someone, choose wisely. Choose the person who aligns naturally with your worldview. Otherwise, it's going to be a constant struggle. Probably you're going to end up hating each other at some point. Say if you are very orderly, right? And you and you start living with someone who's not orderly, which is very difficult to adjust. Like, it's a fundamental personality trait. You're most likely going to have issues around how orderly you are. Like, the one person is going to want all the dishes clean immediately after dinner, and the other person would like to have like a beer and watch TV and think about it later. So in the company context, it's exactly the same thing. If you hire for people who are naturally aligned with your mission, I mean, that's a lot. I mean, if you hire someone who would make progress toward your mission independently from being hired by your company, I mean, that's a big, big, big plus, because you share an objective, just like a family or a couple. If you have a couple, if you have a wife and you have kids, then you have a shared objective that simplifies many things, in most of the cases. So naturally aligned with your mission, naturally aligned with your values. In SafetyWing, our values are tools, are not phrases, are not slogans, are actually very specific things designed to navigate SafetyWing in a successful way. So, for example, one of our values is be authentic. If you hire someone who's authentic, if you hire someone who's creative, that's another one of our values, then most likely you won't have to correct for these things. Finally, you shouldn't hire assholes. That's another big, even if they are good at what they do. So that's another thing that you can get wrong too, by the way. There is some error here. But, hire someone that you would like to have a cup of coffee with. Someone who seems authentic is also a very good indication. So, hiring right fixes proactively most of that kind of misalignment issue. You make mistakes, and when that happens, many times you have to make the tough decision of separating this person from the company. It sort of never works. Like, you can teach skills, but you cannot teach worldview. That seems to be right. And then I think that's it. I think that hiring the right people, well, and there are some tactics, right? Constantly talking about your mission, not in an instrumental way. That's the thing. In SafetyWing, we have an amazing mission that we're actually trying to accomplish. And it's not like we want to be the top distributor for the Northwest. No, it's like we are building the first country on the internet, which is a lofty, amazing mission. So we constantly address the fact that what we're doing is meant to fulfill that mission. We constantly talk about our values in different ways. Like, for example, one of our traditions is during our strategy team meetings, one of our team members will do a presentation about one of our values in her own way, like in her own interpretation. How does this lives in your work, in your life? Many times it goes through work into life as well.
And you mentioned that be authentic was one of the values. And I'd love to come back to the mission about creating a country on the internet. Because I think that sounds incredible and massive all together at the same time. So what other values does SafetyWing hold then? So be authentic is one.
Yes. We have 10, and I don't remember all of them by memory, but
sorry, I wasn't intending it to be a test. Sorry.
No, that I can try, and I know. Yeah, let's see. I think I can I can say all 10. But the first one is aim for the ideal. This is a cool one. It has a sort of story to it. Aim for the ideal. So when I joined SafetyWing, that value didn't exist. Most of the other ones did, but that one didn't. And the first thing when I joined SafetyWing is that I spoke to everyone in the team. And I asked them about the values, about the company, the work. It was an amazing experience. And something that many people said was around this concept of building something to make the world better, bringing something that is more ideal. And the team felt extremely idealistic to me, like big ideas people. So I thought we should probably add this to our values. And we did. And it is our first value. I don't know if the most important one, but certainly the first one. The second one is be authentic. We discussed that already. Authenticity is a huge part for those two reasons, anti-corruption and true connection. The third one is create, don't copy. I'm cheating now, by the way. I'm using this little booklet that we created, which is
that's fine. It's okay.
Yeah, it's like a storybook for children based on our values. It's one of my favorite projects we ever did. So create, don't copy is all about being creative, and because we want to reach somewhere, we want to go somewhere new. The only way to do that is by making new things. It's also a great answer to what sounds like, let's do this because it's best practice. So yeah, create, don't copy. Or if you are going to adopt the best practice, and many times we do, you need to have a reason for that. Number 4 is simple is better. Because simple things take less effort from the customer, from the user, and that makes them better. Simple is better. Do only what matters. This is a tricky one. Do only what matters is about prioritization, right? You see this every day. You can be very busy doing 100 things at a company, 100 meaningless things. Or you can do only what matters, do one very important future defining thing. This one is very hard to do proactively. Easier when you look retrospectively than proactively, but it's one of those things that you always optimize for. It also supports every team member into not appearing to be busy. That's pure corruption. Number 6 is make things people love. And that is a powerful one for me personally. I remember I was talking to Sondre, our CEO, when documenting these values, and we both are big Seinfeld fans, and we were talking about Seinfeld and how it's an example of something that people love, because they make it. They made it with great care and passion for the comedy. It wasn't superfluous. It was only meant to be funny, and it was made with great care, and it stands the test of time. Number 7 is dare to make mistakes. Such a good and important one. Dare to make mistakes. Because, I mean, you cannot predict the outcome of anything you do. So if you want to do something new, you probably will make mistakes along the way. Many of those mistakes will shape the path that you took somewhere. Many of those mistakes will be necessary, will be pivoting points, will determine where you go. I'm about to be done, but I'm very passionate about all of these. Let the best idea...
No, you don't need to. I'm loving it. Keep going.
All right. Let the best idea win is about having a flat hierarchical structure and trying to prioritize ideas over hierarchies, over groups, over friendships. It's another one of those that you can permanently, forever optimize for. And you do need management structures many times. And the people with the most context should make decisions, but those decisions should be based on ideas and nothing else, hopefully. I love number 9. Number 9 is about personal agency, and it's you can do it, because nothing will happen unless you make it happen. And this is remarkable. I speak with everyone in SafetyWing regularly, like on one-on-one settings, and this is one of those things that people need to be reminded of, including myself, starting with myself. The fact that if you see something that isn't working, you can actually fix it right now, and you don't have to ask anyone. Just do it. You can do it. It's kind of, I think we're sort of trained somehow. I don't know if it's the education system, if it's the way in which we're taught about what means to work with a group. But many people, again, starting with myself, believe that things are someone else's responsibility, or that you have to get consensus, or that your boss should approve, or stuff like this, which makes you realize something and then forget about it. Instead, we in SafetyWing, we use this garden analogy. So SafetyWing is like a big garden, and every person has like a small part assigned to her, and each person is responsible for maintaining that small part. But at the same time, we walk this garden constantly, all the time, every part of it. Some people more than others, but if you're walking the garden or someone else's garden and you see, weeds, just pull them out. Just right away. Don't wait for anything. Don't wait for anyone. You can do it.
Yeah.
Finally, be good to each other, which is about being charitable in interpretation and taking people seriously, because everything we do becomes the culture. That's the end of it.
Okay.
What do you think?
So as you're working your way through, oh, sorry, go on.
What do you think about that? How does that sound to you?
So I think it sounds wonderful and clear, and a way that, because I think sometimes sort of single statements on their own could be, I don't know, used or interpreted in a way that may do the corruption bit that you talked about earlier on. And when I then read through all 10, I mean, I don't know this, and you haven't said this either, but my guess would be, because when you said number 5, for example, when you said do only what matters, I could imagine in some situations or some contexts that could be used as a way of abdicating responsibility.
Yeah.
And not doing something, not delivering something, not achieving something, because I could say, well, it didn't matter at that point in time. So, when it needed to be done, something else was more important, and you tell me to do only what matters. So that's what I did. I did what matters.
And that is true, but that is true. That's a very acute observation. All of these are trade-offs. All of these, because you can be creative. Up to what are you going to build your laptop? Is that how creative do you want to be? You see what I mean? Yeah. You're right. Yes.
Yeah, and I think and then when you look at all of them in the round, it then allows you to go, Well, yes, all right. Yes, I did do only what mattered, but maybe at the same time I wasn't being good to each other because you needed me to do whatever that thing was, Adrian,
Yeah.
and because I didn't do it,
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been good to you.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
or yes, I did only what mattered, but I didn't dare to make a mistake
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because this other thing that I could have done was riskier. I didn't do it because it didn't matter as much as this other thing did.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I don't know if I would say trade-offs. I suppose for me, I was thinking of it more as a way of you can use all 10 as, I don't know, indicators that can help me that can help me as a colleague
Yes.
make good decisions on the actions that I should be taking.
Yes. 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 I mean,
So yeah, sorry, go on.
no,
You go.
that's perfect. You can be cynical and you can handle this in a utilitarian way. You can absolutely manipulate most situations by advocating any of these values. And I haven't seen that much. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it like a couple times, maybe. Um, but we hire very smart, kind people, and they don't,
Mm,
uh, because what is the foundation for all of this is being an independent thinker and being
hmm
like a nice person. So yeah, it, but you're right. It's like a compass of sort. This is a sort of instrument that can help you navigating different situations. That's about it.
Yeah. So within emotional work, we try and do it within, I guess, two different statements, I suppose, or two different items.
Mm-hmm.
So so we talk about how emotions can be really enriching. They can enrich relationships, they can enrich lives, they can enrich experiences,
Mm-hmm.
um, and emotions can be really enriching. They can also be quite harmful to individuals, harmful to relationships, harmful to experiences, harmful to companies, cultures, teams. Mm, And so when we hire, we sort of talk about we've got like a what we call a ways of working document, which is, I guess, this bit of a buzzword thing, but and within that it outlines at every point in a day, and you're reaching a decision point,
Mm-hmm.
and if the answer to the question is this enriching lives? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
carry on.
Mm-hmm.
Is this causing harm? Yes, stop immediately.
Hmm. I
So
understand.
that could be harm to yourself, it could be harm to a colleague, it could be harm to, yeah, to a client. And it's not to say that you shouldn't then do it, but it's to say that's a stop point where you should go, is it, how do I want to do this? How do I want to do this in a way that can be as constructive as possible?
Mm.
So I did a piece of work last week where a team didn't have a lot of what you're describing. You try and create a safety wing. So they weren't really being that good to each other.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't fixing it right now. They weren't kind of grabbing the weed as they were walking past. They weren't letting the best idea win, and they weren't being authentic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we got to a point where there was there was just an awful lot of emotion in the room,
Mm-hmm.
and where people were starting to become overwhelmed with the feelings that they were having and the thoughts they were having about where the team was at and how the team was interacting and so on. And I reached a point where I had to go, if I let this continue, is this causing harm to the individuals here and or the team here? Because if it is, I need to stop.
Right. Right.
Because I know this doesn't feel really enriching right now. This feels really tough right now, but it's not causing harm yet. It's causing discomfort, yes, but harm, no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And and so that it's a calibration, I guess, for me to go, if it starts to cause harm, I've just got to stop and go, what am I doing? Am I doing this for the right reasons, and so on. So um in a way, I'd like the simplicity of what we're trying to do, but sometimes it doesn't account for nuance. And I really like the balance that you've got across those 10 values that allows you to use it maybe in a bit more an explicit way than we have in terms of a checklist.
Let me ask you something. So that's fascinating to me, the bit about emotion being constructive or destructive. But that implies that the person, like on a personal level, you have to be mindful enough to first realize your emotions, which is not easy. And second, to be mindful enough to stop and to do the act of realization. Two very different things, right? Particularly when people are feeling strong emotion, that could be difficult. So how do you achieve that?
So partly there's a lot of work that's gone into it, I suppose. So my quest with emotions began 20 something years ago, where I really should have been fired for something I said to a customer. I didn't think they could hear me. I thought I'd press the mute button and they couldn't hear what I was saying, but they could. So when I told them to shut the up and stop crying like a
wow,
they didn't take that too well.
Yeah.
But it began a quest for me in terms of understanding more about emotions, so on. And one of the words that I use a lot, I think I use a lot anyway, is about being considerate. And I think it's being considerate or considering is an undervalued or an underappreciated word. Because am I being considerate about myself, considerate about how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, how that's impacting my behavior, how that's impacting the emotions I might be projecting onto other people, and similarly, how am I being considerate about what others might be experiencing? I'll be going back to something you said, which I really liked, was about being charitable to each other. Because sometimes we might see somebody's behavior and go, "Oh, look at them! They've just ignored me."
Exactly.
This is all about me, and I've done something to offend them. Whereas if I was being charitable, I might go, "Oh, I wonder what's going on for them today. That's different behavior to normal. I want to go and check in and see if they're okay."
That's exactly right. That's exactly the use case we use for be charitable interpretation. You could misconstrue that as being weak or not having clear expectations for others, which is not the intention at all. It's just being charitable. Yeah.
So when you're, when SafetyWing then are hiring and wanting to make really good decisions when they're hiring, and are looking to hire for authenticity, looking to hire for integrity, maybe looking to hire against these 10 values.
Yeah.
Is there a risk that you end up hiring this kind of, I mean, I was going to say clones, but that's probably a bit extreme. Do you risk only hiring a particular type of person?
Yeah, I think you do. Yes, I think you do. It's interesting. So I wonder if implicitly we're saying or accepting that that's not good, hiring the same type of person. But let's say that there is something concerning about that. Is that the intention of the question, though?
So I suppose I'm thinking about it from a diversity point of view. And I'm not talking diversity from a particular characteristic, whether that be talking about gender or
no, I get it. I totally get it.
Socioeconomic class, or those kinds of things. That was what was behind my question, I guess.
Yeah. No, that I love the diversity topic. It's fascinating to me because it's very hard to define what it means. So in SafetyWing, we hire remotely across the world. There are no restrictions at all for your like geographic location or ethnicity or religion, whatever. There is we just hire we hire from the world pool, which is pretty fascinating, right? And that creates a demographically diverse team. So I'm Peruvian. My manager is Norwegian. My friend is from Texas. You see what I mean? I have coworkers from Romania and Portugal. So all over the place. So that creates a very diverse, demographically speaking, group. At the same time, we have a sort of consistent worldview, sort of consistent within the cultural differences, right? That's another axis. But say we have very diverse cultures as well.
Absolutely.
Someone from Germany will be very different than me. At the same time, we share the internet culture, which is very interesting. Like most of us were raised during or with or along with the internet. So we share the language, which is not our primary language in many cases, like mine, which is English. And along with the language, we share a bit of the culture from the US / the internet. So we share some sort of worldview. So when we talk about diversity, I don't really know what it means. In some ways, we're very diverse. In some ways, we're not. But I think we are, that you're right. We do hire for a sort of profile. And within that profile, there is lots of diversity in different ways.
Yeah, and I think because it was about that. When I think back to your, kind of aim for the ideal, create, don't copy, make things people love, let the best idea win. If you don't have variety and difference in that, not necessarily, as I said earlier on, it's not. I wasn't asking it from a particular characteristic perspective. I was from a how do you create that difference of thought and that difference of ideas and suggestions and options and solutions for clients and so on.
Let me ask you,
I guess that cultural, go on.
I mean, that's fascinating to me. Okay, but I'll give you two examples. Well, I'll give you one and one reflection. So we're trying to build content on the internet and a global social safety net for that country on the internet.
Okay. Yep.
When we talk about the global social safety net, there is a lot of diverse thinking here because our founders are Norwegian. They have a social safety net that works very gracefully, and they want to bring that to the world, right? I'm Peruvian. I don't have that social safety net. I wish I did. I wish my kids do. So I want aspirationally to create that. Those are very different starting points to achieve our mission. Equally as strong, I would say. But the example I wanted to give you is different. That's just a random reflection.
Yes, okay.
The example
it was a useful reflection. Thank you.
Yeah. I love football, right? Soccer, whatever.
Yeah.
I love Barcelona. That's my team. I've been watching Barcelona for 10 years. And one of the reasons why they're one of the biggest clubs in the world is because they play the game in a very specific way under a set of rules that are not objectively better are just the way that Barcelona does it, which are, keep the ball, have possession, tactical stuff like that, but also soft stuff like be good to other players, don't injure other players, play a fair game. You see what I mean? There's this code of conduct, and they don't recruit for this. I mean, they do, but they don't recruit like adults for this. They train the kids at La Masia from like age 6, and they shape the kids to be consistent. So I would argue that diversity of style, let's call it style, meaning values and worldview and approach to something, is not necessarily objectively better than consistency. Think about the Beatles. Consistent, even for a short period of time, even with all the dissonance within the personal group, consistency towards what they want to achieve, and how to do it.
Okay. One of the things that I mentioned in the intro that we haven't touched on yet is we talked about buzzwords when we were doing our kind of our conversation beforehand.
Yes.
So we talked about things like burnout, emotional intelligence, psychological safety, that maybe you don't necessarily think help company culture.
Right.
And that's quite a different perspective. So I thought it might be useful to hear your thoughts on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not against any of these concepts, really. But I think, and this relates so much to authenticity, what I think is that many people will adopt things without understanding them and their implications. So, for example, I love the whole psychological safety thing. And again, like in the context of my own beliefs and in the context of a functional group, like I would say SafetyWing, psychological safety is like saying, I have a room in my house in which I won't hit my kids. That's ridiculous, right? Because it means that in every other room I could hit my kids, and I would, and I will. So I think that psychological safety is one of those things that people will use to say that right now in this conversation there is safety. But the problem is, sure, great. The problem is that what the implication is that in other conversations there is no safety, and that's ridiculous. So I would say that maybe this is idealistic, but in a functional group, every conversation should be safe. So I just think it's a little silly to try to bring this. It seems like I don't want to I don't want to downplay the work that people do, but say if you work at a fast food chain restaurant and your instructions are quite rigid and repetitive, and maybe people are not extremely committed on average to their work. Maybe some of these ideas are useful, but they come across as being instrumental anyway. In a good culture, in a good environment, these things are meaningless in a way because it's already in place. So most of these like buzzwords and trends are so superficial that I find them funny. Yeah, I'm a rebel.
It's okay. And so I guess it's interesting. I like the distinction you've made there to say, well, if I create a psychologically safe conversation here, and I'm calling this conversation psychologically safe, and I guess you and I aren't necessarily colleagues, so maybe my example doesn't scan, but I'll go with it anyway. If I can say, well, I can create this psychologically safe conversation here, or I can create this this psychologically safe team within this company, what does that say about the rest of the team or the rest of the company or other conversations that happen?
Yes, exactly.
And similarly, I guess with something like burnout, then that if I'm singling that out as something that happens within a team, a company, or an organization, or a profession, what does that by having to single it out because it's happening, what does that say about what's happening in the rest of that? Is that right?
Well, the issue, particularly with burnout, the issue that I have is that the word means something very dramatic. It's like close to depression or close to exhaustion. Like, yeah, people get tired. People need rest. Like in SafetyWing, we have this unlimited PTO policy. We believe in stress and rest cycles, just like physical exercise, which I think, or we believe is healthy. But I'm not saying that this happens in SafetyWing because it doesn't, but I've seen that people using the word burnout as saying, I'm tired or I need some rest. And, it's one of these words people just throw around. And the issue that I have with buzzwords is the superficial nature of the mass adoption comes with superficial understanding of it. It's just something that sounds, that resonate with something that you feel, and people feel stressed, but that doesn't mean that you're burning out. Those are very different things.
Yeah. So I had something similar, or I have something similar with imposter syndrome. So that's not to say that it doesn't exist. I mean, technically, the words are inaccurate because it's imposter phenomenon, not imposter syndrome, because it's not a syndrome, because it's based on the definition by Rosie Clance and Pauline Imes. Was it Suzanne Imes? By Clance and Imes, anyway. It's contextually relevant and episodic in its nature, so it's not debilitating in that way.
Right.
And also, being anxious or fearful or nervous or scared does not necessarily equal having imposter phenomenon.
Right. You're right.
So, so there's a number of characteristics that that they describe alongside it, and general, and they say that it can be confused with generalized anxiety, or it can be confused with with being anxious.
Yes.
Not necessarily having imposter phenomenon.
Yes.
And anxiety is a generalized anxiety is more of a what's the word I'm looking for? A debilitating condition than it is an episodic experience.
Exactly. That makes a lot of I love that analysis. Yeah. I think you're correct.
Yeah. Okay. So what we'll do shortly is start to move into the kind of closing the podcast off. And one of the ways that I like to do that bridge is to ask one of my favorite questions, which is what surprised you question. So my question will be, what surprised you most since joining SafetyWing?
That's a good question. Hard to answer. So, okay, here's an answer. I say this very humbly, but as I mentioned, I dropped out of high school when I was 15, right? Very young. And I started working like the day after I did, working online. And I've done so many things in the past 20 years. Like I started as a logo designer. I was designing logo. I didn't know how to design logos, but I was designing logos for like $2 a piece.
Okay.
yeah, so I did that. I was a developer, I was a musician, I was a teacher, videographer. I've done so many things in my life. And I've always felt, and I say this very humbly, I've always felt like the smartest guy in the room, um, since very early age. When I joined
Hmm.
SafetyWing, that radically changed. I felt like the dumbest guy in the room all of a sudden, and
Okay.
you could call that imposter syndrome. I'm just kidding. Um, um, yeah, I mean, not the dumbest, but I felt pretty average. And to me, that was
Mm.
surprising. That was inspiring. That was so aspirational, so motivating. Like, oh, I need to improve my game here
Mm.
because my peers are so good. Um, and Safety Wing is like, to me, it's like this. I'm getting paid very well to learn from world class people. So yeah, that was extremely, and it is still extremely surprising to me.
Fabulous. That must be yeah, that must have been a yeah, as you said, an inspiring experience.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so where can people find out more about Safety Wing then, Adrian?
SafetyWing.com. That's the place to go.
Wonderful. And you so you said the mission, I think you said the mission is
Hmm.
about creating a country on the internet,
Yes, sir.
and then creating a global social safety
Net.
net as well. Is that right?
Yes, our vision is to create a global social safety net, and that is
Hmm.
health, income protection, retirement products. Um, so you have a safety net if things go wrong. Uh,
Hmm.
you will fall, but you won't hurt yourself. Um, for the first country on the internet, that is our mission. Um, and that means that's a sort of, and you should do an episode with Lauren Rasavi, our VP of communications, about this country on the internet initiative. But that's basically being a citizen as a membership, a citizenship as a membership. Uh, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And if people wanted to get hold of you, what's the good way for them to get hold of you?
If you Google Adrian Salazar, you'll find my LinkedIn profile right there. That's a good place.
Wonderful. Then we'll put a link to it. We'll put a link to your profile in the show notes as well.
Mm-hmm.
So as we come to a close then, is there something else? Something else, something more, something you're thinking, feeling, or would like to say before we close this off?
Yeah, I guess a reflection would be, or my overall feeling now is that I wish this type of work environment and culture to more people. Um, it's it seems like there's this contradiction, and it's a false one. That people believe
Hmm.
that if you're happy at your workplace, if you're inspired, if you have well-being, if you're taken seriously, the work must be suffering or the business might be suffering. It's not good for business to do so much for team members, but it's actually the other way around. If you have good culture, good teams, and people are happy, taken seriously, and have a good like well-being overall, they will contribute to the business in a more meaningful way. And I wish, um, from I observe that many places, most places in the world, most businesses don't operate this way, and I wish more people would have access to something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Okay, then, in which case I'll say, Adrian, thank you so much for joining us on the Emotion at Work podcast today. And for you, fair listener, we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Emotion at Work podcast, and if you got this far, you must be interested in the role that emotions have in the workplace, either within individuals, between people in teams, or in organisations as a whole. So head over to the Emotion at Work hub, which you can find at community.emotionatwork.co.uk. Thanks for listening.